this episode of Screwing with the Smart Car. We are going to put the return style fuel system on it, or I should say the boost adjusting fuel pressure regulator on rising rate fuel pressure regulator. So here we go. So the tank took, what, 8 minutes to take out?
Yeah.
About 8 minutes of Phil breaking his back, as you guys just saw in that time lapse. Came apart pretty quick. Took the innards out, so this whole entire thing is the regulator, which is insane. And it's got like a pressure sensor on the end of it. So took all that out. We have the factory pump in there, because the factory pump's been holding up fine. So we may as well just try it. And then just some hose, and then there's like this evap thing in the tank. We're gonna hijack that and use that for our return line on the rising rate regulator. So now all we gotta do is put it all back together. Luckily, we're down about a gallon of fuel because we spilt it on the floor. Got the fuel tank back in, didn't really record that because it was a process. It would have been like an hour long. So we're trying to find where we're gonna mount the regulator. The sensor makes it kind of hard because it sticks out so far. But there's this gaping hole over here, so I'm gonna make a bracket that puts it like right there. It means we're gonna have to run a lot of fuel line out and around everything. It is what it is, because I gotta re-tidy up all the wiring anyway after this week, because we should be done adding stuff to this, so it should be fine. Time to actually finalize the wiring. Because we also have this, a VR to Hall converter, so that I can tap into the speed sensor on this thing to give the fuel tech a speed reading, so we can tell it what gear it's in, so we can do a boost by gear, and we can do ignition cut for shifts, because right now the way I have it set up is you have to hold the upshift in order to get the ignition to cut, and it shuts the ignition off basically until you let go. So it kind of sucks. It'd be nice to do that automatically. So we have this, an input expander for it, because we also have the fuel level gauge going in there. We're going to test the rear wheel speed. If this works, we'll do a front wheel speed one as well. I have a couple of those in there. And the nitrous should be here tomorrow, right? All the nitrous. 50 shot?
No.
All right, fine, 75. All right, 10.
There we go.
Just gonna run the nitrous to spool the turbo up a little bit more. So that's where we're at. Okay, so we got more fuel line in. I just got the hoses started. So what we're gonna do for mounting the regulator, which is not a lot of space, I removed this engine bay cooling fan. We're not gonna need that anymore. One of two reasons. One, we're way past that. And two, we have a giant fan on the intercooler, which is gonna pull air that way. So it should circulate the air in the engine bay, because that's essentially what that one did, is it just moved air around. So the regulator, I bent the bracket. We're gonna mount it down here like that. Plenty of room for the sensor, plenty of room for the lines. I opened up the harness so I could move the flex fuel and pressure sensors from over there to over here. So I gotta hook the regulator up now, and then we'll pressurize the fuel system and kind of see what happens. That's kind of where we're at. A nitrous kit for the Smart, and these are the nitrous bottles. They're 1 pound bottles. Just as a comparison, this is your standard nitrous bottle. I think it's 10 pounds. So just as a comparison for how small they are, we're only going to be running at the most a 15 shot just to spool the turbo up, and it will only be when he's over X amount of throttle, and so it's hardly ever going to use any of this, which is why we went so small. We're going to mount one and have one full as a backup. I have somebody coming to grab these to go get them filled, and getting nitrous bottles filled in this area is tough. The owner of the car actually had to call in a favor from a diesel buddy of his who just happens to have a nitrous tank, and we're gonna just transfer fill them, which isn't gonna fill them to the tippity top, but it will get enough in there so that we can use them. The kit, the kit we got is called an incognito kit, and it's super, super, super basic. So basic that I thought pieces were missing, because this is it. That's it. You have a solenoid, this connects to the bottle, and then it's just a blank hose that you can stick in the intake. We're gonna do it a little different. The jet is actually inside this piece right here. You can swap the jets out, but it mounts right to the solenoid, which mounts right to the bottle. So that's interesting. I've never seen something like that before, but we're gonna make this so that it actually like attaches to the intake, so that way it can't like fall out or blow out or anything like that. So get the fuel pressure regulator hooked up, and then we'll work on this. All right, we are running on the regulator. Just adjusted the fuel pressure. It's sitting right at 50 PSI, which is about where it was. It's like between 48 and 50 from the factory. We're idling good. Our air fuel ratio is a little on the rich side, but that's to be expected. It's going to be a little bit off, but it is working. So I got to finish mounting that bracket. I only put one side in, so it's easy to get to everything. And then clean up all the hoses and the wiring, and I got to put the new wiring in. The bottles are on their way to get filled up. So that's exciting. Okay, we got the nitrous solenoid wired up. I strapped the fuel line stuff together. I got to move that back and kind of tuck it, and then we'll start doing some wire management here, because the input expander wiring is a lot. So I want to get the main stuff cleaned up. We have like a lot of wires like tapped into each other so that we can figure out how to get stuff working. We don't need that anymore. We can actually fully wire it in, so we're going to do that next. And then speed sensor for the rear, using one of these Hall converter things that Fuel Tech sells. And then it should be ready to go back on the dyno and see what happens. Oh, I do have to run the hose for this to the intake of the turbo, but that's pretty easy. Okay, so got nitrous bottles back, hooked solenoid up. I went into the tune file and got everything set up for that. Tested it, it works. The owner, Phil, who was in the video earlier, came by. We're gonna mount the tank here. We do have two of them, so we will eventually mount the other one there and run them together into this. But for now, we're just gonna run it this way. So that's working. We also are gonna get a pressure gauge set up for it, pressure sensor for it. So that's working. The fan on the intercooler is fighting me. It works when I power it up with this, but for some reason the 12 volt coming out of the ECU isn't making it work. So I got to play around with that more. I mean, it's the end of the day at this point. We have the wiring harness for our input expander, which that's the input expander there. Gonna mount the input expander up here, just as a little feature thing. Put a nice loom on the harness and do that. For now, I only need one of these inputs for the rear speed sensor, and then we're gonna need an input for the pressure gauge on this. We're gonna need a couple other inputs for another thing we're gonna be doing down the road. We're actually gonna need a lot of inputs for that. Not performance related, but it is something we're gonna try to have the Fuel Tech control. Nobody's ever done it before, but we'll see if it works. I need an input for fuel level as well, because factory fuel level gauges in these cars are absolutely horrendous. Like, it'll be reading half a tank, you'll drive it, you'll stay at half a tank, you shut it off, you get back in it, and it's empty. They're horrible. It's a known issue on them. So we're hijacking the fuel level sender unit. I already ran the wires for that when we had the tank out. But that's gonna wrap up today. Tomorrow we'll be just finishing up some stuff. You can see I started tidying up the wiring harness. That already looks leaps and bounds better than it did before. I have a little spade connector here These are actually for the power and ground for the coils and the injectors. I'm going to leave these exposed so that if we need to unplug anything, we can. The reason I didn't do one of these connectors on this is because these connectors can't really handle high amperage. So this is just the way I did it. It's not the prettiest thing in the world, but it works and it's easy to work with. So that's going to stay like that. So yeah, that's where we're at for now. And then I'll do more on it tomorrow. I'm hoping to get this thing on the dyno tomorrow, midday. I do need to do some work on the 300ZX tomorrow, so hopefully this doesn't take too long. But it's coming along.